Hello everyone. Our presentation is going to be about the Fugitive Slave Acts. The Fugitive Slave Acts were two laws that allowed the capture and return of runaway slaves within the United States. The first one, the 1793 Fugitive Slave Act, authorized local governments to capture and return fugitive slaves to their owners. Also, different penalties were imposed to anyone who helped slaves to escape. This law had widespread resistance, especially from the northern states. This led to the creation of the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. This one added further provisions regarding runaways, and harsher punishment measures were imposed to people who helped slaves to escape. These laws were among the most controversial laws of the 19th century. Both were repealed by an act of Congress in 1864. Now Soledad is going to talk about the historical background of the Fugitive Slave Acts.
Background. Studies regarding refugee slaves existed in America as early as 1643, and the New England Confederation and slave laws were later enacted in several of the 13 original colonies. Among others, New York passed a 1705 measure designed to prevent runaways from fleeing to Canada, and Virginia and Maryland drafted laws offering bounties for the capture and return of escaped slaves. By the time of the United States Constitutional Convention in 1787, many northern states such as Vermont and New Hampshire had abolished slavery. Concerned that these new free states will become safe shelters from the runaway slaves, Southern politicians saw that the Constitution included a fugitive slave clause. The stipulation stated that no person held to service or labor would be released from bondage in the event that they escaped to a free state.
Okay, and now let's move on to the Fugitive Slave Act, and this is the 1793 law. And this law is very similar to the Fugitive Slave Clause in many ways, but this one included a more detailed description of how the law is supposed to put into practice. It also decreased the slave owners and their agents from searching escaped slaves throughout the borders of the free states. That means if the agents happen to find a slave that actually escaped from them, they actually have to present proofs and the person to a judge, so the judge is going to decide whether or not the slave belongs to the owner. And the law also imposed a 500 penalty to any person who actually helped slaves from escaping from the area of work.
The law had mostly negative reactions from people living in the north. The first reason is because the law promoted bounty hunters, and the second reason because the law was equivalent to legalized kidnapping. Since northern states didn't want to be part of the institution of slavery, they ignored to apply this law. Instead, they passed the so-called personal liberty laws, which means that when runaways were accused of escaping, they had the right to a jury trial. However, in 1842, the Supreme Court case Prick versus Pennsylvania challenged these personal liberty laws. The case was about Edward Prick. He was a Maryland man, and he was convicted of kidnapping a suspected slave. The trial was in favor of Edward Prick. Finally, this set a precedent that federal laws replace any state measure that may interfere in the Fugitive Slave Act.
Hello, my name is Lidia, and today I'm going to tell you about the Fugitive Slave Law of 1850. As northern states helped fugitive slaves to escape, southern states started to pressure the Congress to revise and change the Fugitive Slave Law of 1793 for a new one. This new law forced citizens to assist in the capture of runaway slaves. It also denied slaves the right to a jury trial. Additionally, it increased the penalty for interfering with the rendition process. And in order to ensure the enforcement of the law, federal commissioners were paid more for returning a suspected slave than for freeing them. As a result, this act was more criticized and resisted than the earlier measure.
The repeal of the Fugitive Slave Acts. The strong opposition to the Fugitive Slave Acts of 1850 saw the law become virtually unenforceable in certain northern states, and by 1860 only 330 slaves had been returned to the southern masters. Republican and Free Soil congressmen introduced bills and resolutions in order to repeal the Fugitive Slave Acts, but the law